Hello and welcome to Saturday. This is the lead up to the election in the UK. It's the 2nd of May, so only about a week left before we have to vote. So I thought I'd spend my time doing some Infinity and do some gaming. Well, what we've got here is some Arsa models from the Panoceania faction. There's quite a few different factions in the Infinity game. These ones I picked because I think it was in the early days, about 4 or 5 years ago, I saw this model and I thought, well, I like that model so much in terms of its sort of Japanese manga mecha feel that I decided to invest in that particular faction that it came with. This is called a tag. It's a sort of remote. There's no guy in there apparently. This is a remotely controlled robot with a very large heavy machine gun and a variety of other toolkits. I think it's a camo based one as well. In terms of where I am with these, I'm right in the early processes of airbrushing and masking. This is the most complete in terms of the bigger models because I've masked it and I've airbrushed. So the next phase for this is the detailing phase. I did a sample. What I normally do when I do, because I've got quite a few of these models all sort of sitting around here as well, is I'll take one to its sort of finish. I mean, it was a bit rough to be honest with you, but I rushed it, but this one is nearly done. I'm going to do a black trim around the base, and there's probably some more fine details needed, but this is pretty close to the kind of thing I'm looking for. So as you can see, I've done some detailing on that backpack on the back to make it look like it's sort of a material with the sort of stretch marks detailed on there around the edge where the clip goes onto it. You know, otherwise I'm quite happy with that as a tabletop sort of standard for me. But I will do more. I certainly spend more time when I'm working on these bigger pieces. One other thing I do with my Infinity, which, I mean, this is the first set I've ever painted, but these two are both snipers, and I've sort of sanded down the end of the sniper rifles and added a sort of bit of brass. I'm trying to see if I can see my brass rod around anywhere to show you, but essentially I cut the rod down. Oh, there it is. So this is the sort of brass rod I used. I think that was the one I used. Yep. And I made a sort of silencer to go on the end, and that's just because I find the sniper long-range weapons in Infinity, they kind of end in a fluted sort of end, and it doesn't do anything for me. So I decided to put those on. I didn't spend a lot of time on that, kind of snip them and put them on, and hopefully that'll look good once it's painted. It'll look more integrated as part of the model. And this one here that's laying down, he actually came with a sculpted base, which you would put into a slotter style base, but I've put him onto a standard antinosity base. Obviously doesn't have a slot because it's already detailed. However, I noticed the sort of shape of the guy and how obviously the weapons held horizontally sort of fitted this sort of edge of the curb, so he looks like he's on the bottom of the curb leaning up, and I've put this terrain item, I glued that on, which is like a gas can, petrol can, to make him lean on it. Obviously nothing better than sniping from a fully loaded petrol can beneath you, but I thought for a bit of fun it looked okay, and it matched the shape of the model in that normally he was lying on this kind of earthen lump that he came with in his pack, but that makes it sort of fit nicely on there. And I also glued on those two old shell cases. Again, probably not the shell cases that came out of his weapon, but I just like the fact that they draw the eye in a bit more detail, and I'll paint them a different colour to the base, so that'll add detail. Other comments to make about using with Infinity, using these kind of pre-textured bases, and that's that many Infinity models, I'll get a couple as examples, have this sort of freeform movement, which is rather nice actually, in that they look like they're in mid-jump, twisting round a corner, moving athletically, and because of that it lends itself perfectly for the sort of slotter style setup, because if you look at this chap here, that back foot was free in the air on the slotter. The unfortunate thing with that, of course, is that when you move to mounting them on these kind of bases, it's difficult to glue them on and pin them down, with only one foot, because they're so fine, the pinning tends to not be strong enough to hold them in kind of mid-leap. So what I've done is, where I can, like this one, I've rested the rear foot on a curve or on a, I've glued that sort of grill on there as well, just to give them something to sit on. And here's another one, the same, where, you know, normally he'd sort of be up in the air but with one of his feet, but I've put one side down. So just those are general observations. Now talking about the actual painting technique. First thing, if I show you up underneath here, difficult to see, but up under, try and get it to a good spot actually, there we go. You can see it's very dark underneath this model, and that's because it was sprayed all black from the underside. Well, the whole thing was primed black. I then went over with a light grey from above spraying down, which gave the, white you can see actually on the basis how that creates shadow, because you get the black trim along the edge of that groove, but with a lighter grey on the top. So that was sprayed downwards to catch the upper areas as if light was falling on the model. And that was just a normal primer grey I used on there, using an airbrush though to spray it on. After that point I switched to the colours I was going to use, and also I went on initially with red, and you can see these guys, they've already got that red and it's gone everywhere, and you think, well, that's no good. But actually what I did after that red went on is I used the Humbrol Maskell, and I painted that on. It's like a purple fishy goopy bit of rubber. You paint it on, ruining your brush at the same time, onto the corners and the edges where I wanted it to remain red. And so, for example, on here, that had a lot of that painted into that red on the metalwork of that arm piece there, and on the other side, and you can see down in here as well, red. Now, for the most part that worked quite well, and you can see a nice clean edge where the purple goop, this stuff, was painted on, and then I went on top with the extra colour, the grey and the blue. The grey and the blue, where you can see, again I'll try and find a good bit where it's a nice strong difference here on the front and on the shoulder pads. I just used the usual masking tape technique. So I went on first of all with all blue, masked it, and then went on with a slightly darker grey to give it the difference in the sort of blue-grey camo. But you can see actually on here there's a strip which I'm running my finger on. That's where I've just literally stuck down the masking tape, and then I use a sharp blade like this to basically cut the things randomly, and then I just stick the masking tape on the various places, and then finally spray over in the extra colour, and then you strip it all off and you get a, you know, a neatly cleaned up figure. If I get a pointy cocktail stick, you can see here this area was painted over with the Maskell, which is why it has a sort of a red, and also in that knee pad there. But you can see what's happened there is I didn't paint enough of the Maskell right down into the bottom. So when I've peeled it off, it's revealed that there was an area where I hadn't quite painted into the corner. So I just have to touch that up in the painting process. Because the next phase on this guy is to basically weather him, panel line, add shading, because at the moment there's just no shading really. There's shading there from an underside sort of perspective, because there's a lot of black left underneath where I didn't paint it. So you can see, if you look at this hand, if you work your way around, it goes very dark underneath the hand where the black primer is still visible. So it has a sort of pre-shade, but not at the level of detail I want. I want the shading around the bits on the helmet. I want shading around those arm sections there, so I'll go in with washes, inks, and a variety of edging techniques. Like if I show you the one that was done, you can see where I've done some edging on that black. I didn't spend much time on it at all, but I did sort of put little white dots at the edge and grey, and it gives it that highlighted look. So that's that. The next phase on these, obviously I've got to go around all of these ones using the Maskell technique to paint that goop onto the red areas that I want, like his neck area there, the top of his arms and things, and then the rest will follow from there. Now here's another one that's at that stage where I've stripped off the maskell from the leg areas, and it's left the sort of red and blue. But he still needs a lot more work. They all need a lot more work, but they're they're slowly getting there, and hopefully I'll have them ready for a game. The convenient thing, of course, with Infinity is that you only really need a dozen models really to get a good game in, and something like this is quite a significant amount of points in the game. So you've got to be playing a big game if you're going to rely on one of these tags to be moving around. So there we go. Thanks for listening in. I'll show progress on this, so once I'm on the next stage I'll perhaps do a little video of me painting on the maskell and doing some airbrushing, and then finally the detailing level as well. Thanks for listening in. Goodbye.